The holographic display in Earth Defense Command's Strategic Operations Center cast an eerie blue glow across Admiral Sarah Chen's face as she studied the sensor readings for the 20th time. The unknown vessels had appeared just beyond Jupiter's orbit less than 6 hours ago, their massive forms dwarfing anything humanity had ever constructed. 73 ships, each one larger than Earth's largest city-states, arranged in a formation that screamed both military precision and technological superiority. Fleet status. Chen's voice remained steady, betraying none of the tension coiling in her stomach. Colonel Maya Patel, her second-in-command, responded without looking up from her neural interface display. Sol Defense Fleet is at full combat readiness. Mars and Luna bases report all planetary defense systems online. The Titan mining colonies have initiated emergency protocols. Chen nodded, though she knew the preparations were likely futile. Humanity had achieved remarkable progress in the past century, colonizing Mars, establishing bases throughout the solar system, even sending the first exploratory vessels toward Alpha Centauri. But the alien armada before them represented technology centuries, perhaps millennia beyond their own. The massive central screen flickered, and Chen felt her breath catch. They were about to find out why these visitors had come. The alien that appeared on screen was breathtaking in its otherworldliness. Its form seemed to shift between solid and liquid, with patterns of bioluminescence rippling across what Chen assumed was its external membrane. When it spoke, its words were preceded by cascades of color that the translation matrix somehow processed into human speech. People of Earth and its territories, I am High Commander Nexus of the Nexari Empire. Your civilization has been observed, evaluated, and found wanting. Chen's fingers tightened on the edge of her command console, but she kept her expression neutral. Around her, the command center staff maintained their professional composure, though the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Your species has shown remarkable potential, but also dangerous instability. Your technological progress has been concerning. The Empire cannot allow another potentially volatile race to develop unchecked. You have two options: accept imperial governance and integration into our civilization, or face immediate extinction. You have 24 Earth hours to submit your response. The transmission cut off, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Chen turned to Dr. James Morrison, head of the Xenological Research Division, who had been quietly taking notes throughout the transmission. Analysis, she asked. Morrison's dark eyes were troubled as he looked up from his datapad. Their technology is far beyond ours. That much is obvious. But there's something else. The way they phrase their ultimatum. They're concerned about our instability. They're afraid of something. Afraid. Of us? Colonel Patel's skepticism was evident. They could glass our entire system without breaking a sweat. Fear isn't always rational, Morrison countered. Look at human history. How many times have technologically superior forces been undermined by their own assumptions about primitive opponents? Chen raised her hand, silencing the brewing debate. Her mind was already racing ahead, connecting dots that had been laid out years ago, in classified meetings and hidden facilities across the solar system. Get me a secure line to the Defense Council, she ordered, and contact Director Zhang at the Titan Research Complex. Authorization code, Omega Black. Colonel Patel's eyes widened slightly, one of the few times Chen had seen her lose composure. Admiral, you're not suggesting. Protocol 0, Chen confirmed, her voice grim. If they want our worlds, they'll learn exactly how far humanity will go to deny them their prize. The next 18 hours were a carefully choreographed dance of preparation and deception. While the world's governments publicly debated the ultimatum, classified facilities across the solar system began activating systems that had been built in secret over the past 2 decades. Protocol 0 wasn't just a defensive strategy. It was humanity's insurance policy against exactly this type of situation. In her private quarters, Chen reviewed the final simulations. The plan was elegant in its simplicity, if horrifying in its implications. Rather than fight a hopeless conventional war, humanity would deny the Nexeri Empire their victory in the most absolute way possible, by making every human-inhabited world in the solar system uninhabitable. Mars' terraforming engines would be reversed, stripping away its newly established atmosphere in hours. The Titan colony's antimatter research facilities would be detonated, creating a chain reaction that would tear Saturn's largest moon apart. And Earth would demonstrate why humanity's instability was something the Nexeri should have taken more seriously. The Defense Council has approved Protocol Zero, Colonel Patel reported, her voice solemn. All colony administrators have acknowledged their orders. We're ready to begin whenever you give the word. Chen stared at the holographic display showing the Nexeri fleet. They hadn't moved, supremely confident in their position. She thought about all the history that would be lost, the worlds that humanity had spent generations building. But she also thought about the alternative, submission to an empire that saw them as nothing more than troublesome children to be controlled. Send our response to the Nexeri, she commanded. Tell them humanity respectfully declines their offer of integration. As the message was transmitted, Chen activated her neural link to the Protocol Zero network. Across the solar system, hidden systems hummed to life, preparing to demonstrate just how far humanity would go to maintain its freedom. The Nexeri were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous opponent isn't the one who fights to win. It's the one willing to lose on their own terms. High Commander Nexus watched the human response flash across his consciousness web with what his species would consider amusement. The rejection was expected. Every species fought back initially. It was part of the natural order, a process the Empire had refined over 10,000 years of expansion. What wasn't expected was the complete lack of panic in the transmission, or the strange energy signatures now emanating from every human settlement in the system. Analysis of human military movements. He pulsed to his tactical advisor. Minimal, High Commander. Their fleet maintains defensive positions, but they've made no attempt to evacuate their colonies or mobilize additional forces. However, the advisor's bioluminescence flickered with uncertainty. We're detecting unusual power fluctuations across all their settlements. On Earth, Admiral Chen stood in the Strategic Operations Center, watching the final countdown. Each human colony and settlement was synchronized to begin their protocols simultaneously. The Titan Research Complex had already begun its antimatter containment shutdown sequence. Mars' terraforming engines were charging for reverse operation, and on Earth, hidden installations across the planet were preparing to demonstrate the full extent of humanity's determination. All stations report ready, Colonel Patel announced. Her usual professional demeanor was tinged with an edge of anticipation. Awaiting your final authorization. Chen took a moment to study the faces around her. These men and women had trained for years for this moment, knowing they might be called upon to destroy everything they'd sworn to protect. The weight of what they were about to do hung heavy in the air, but there was no hesitation in their eyes. Send the initialization codes, Chen ordered. Authorization. Chen Alpha 00 final. Across the solar system, humanity's trap began to spring. On Mars, the massive terraforming engines that had spent decades building the planet's fragile atmosphere suddenly reversed. The carefully constructed atmospheric processors began tearing apart the molecular bonds of the air itself, converting the breathable atmosphere into a caustic soup of chemicals that would take centuries to dissipate. Dr. Elena Santos, lead terraforming engineer on Mars, watched through reinforced windows as the red planet's sky began to burn. Atmospheric degradation proceeding as calculated, she reported through the quantum comlink. Estimated 8 hours until the surface is completely uninhabitable. The Titan Research Complex was next. Dr. Marcus Wong, who had spent his entire career studying antimatter containment, initiated the cascade failure that would tear Saturn's largest moon apart. The antimatter research facilities had been built with this contingency in mind. Their destruction would trigger a chain reaction through the moon's hydrocarbon seas. Containment fields are failing exactly as designed, Wong reported, his voice steady despite the growing vibrations around him. Titan's core will destabilize in approximately 12 hours. But it was Earth that would demonstrate the true extent of humanity's preparation. Beneath every major city, every strategic location, networks of devices that had been disguised as routine infrastructure began to activate. These weren't simple bombs or weapons of mass destruction. They were something far more insidious. Gaia Protocol initiating, Dr. Morrison announced, monitoring the global network. Nanite swarms are deploying as planned. Over the past 20 years, humanity had seeded its homeworld with programmable matter, microscopic machines that could restructure matter at the molecular level. Under normal circumstances, they maintained infrastructure and helped clean up pollution. Now, they began their true purpose, systematically dismantling the planet's biosphere. In orbit, the Nexeri fleet's sensors registered the growing catastrophe. High Commander Nexus watched in disbelief as human world after human world began to self-destruct. This wasn't the desperate deployment of nuclear weapons or other conventional attacks. This was systematic, calculated planetary destruction on a scale the Empire had never encountered. Impossible, he pulsed, his bioluminescence patterns showing extreme agitation. No species would. High Commander. His tactical advisors' patterns were flashing urgent warnings. The humans, they're not just destroying their colonies. They're making their worlds permanently uninhabitable. The chemical changes on Mars will make terraforming impossible for at least 1,000 years. Titan is breaking apart at the atomic level. And Earth's biosphere is being rewritten by some form of technological plague. In the Strategic Operations Center, Admiral Chen watched the Nexeri fleet's reaction. The massive ships had begun to move, but their formation was chaotic, lacking their earlier precision. The Empire had expected resistance, perhaps even suicide attacks. They hadn't expected this level of calculated self-destruction. They're scanning for ways to stop the protocols, Colonel Patel reported, a hint of grim satisfaction in her voice. They won't find any. Every system is autonomous and self-sustaining now. Chen nodded, watching the holographic display as it showed the spread of destruction across their worlds. Protocol Zero had been designed with one principle in mind: deny the enemy any possibility of victory. The Nexeri could still destroy humanity, but they would gain nothing from it except dead worlds that would take millennia to recover. Send the second message, Chen ordered. It was time to show the Empire that humanity's instability was their greatest weapon. As the hours ticked by, the solar system itself began to change. Mars' atmosphere turned into a swirling toxic storm that would scour its surface clean of all human construction. In the Strategic Operations Center, Admiral Chen kept her expression neutral, though her heart was racing. "Can we verify their fleet movements?" she asked. Colonel Patel nodded, gesturing at the tactical display. "They're pulling back beyond Jupiter's orbit. Long-range sensors show their weapons systems powering down. They're serious about this." The past 2 days had transformed the solar system into something unrecognizable. Titan was now an expanding cloud of crystalline debris around Saturn, each fragment encoded with data about humanity's capabilities. Mars had become a toxic wasteland, its atmosphere a swirling storm of molecular machines and caustic compounds. And Earth had become something that defied easy classification. "Current status of the Gaia Protocol?" Chen asked, turning to Dr. Morrison. "Phase 3 is complete," he reported, studying the environmental data. "The nanite swarms have finished their primary transformations. Earth's biosphere is now, well, it's technically alive, but not in any way the Nexeri could exploit. The crystal forests are self-replicating. The oceans have become data matrices, and the atmosphere itself is maintained by networked fields of programmable matter. The surface of humanity's homeworld had become a vast library, every altered molecule carrying information about human history, culture, and most importantly, their unwavering resolve. It wasn't just destruction, it was transformation with purpose. High Commander Nexus studied the latest analysis of the human worlds with growing unease. His species' consciousness web was crowded with competing theories and recommendations, a rare state of discord for the usually unified empire. The human protocols continue to evolve, his chief scientist reported, patterns of fascination mixing with alarm. Their nanite systems aren't simply destroying. They're creating new forms of matter, new types of environmental interactions we've never seen before. Even if we could capture their worlds now, we couldn't use them. More importantly, we couldn't stop these changes from spreading to any world we brought them to. That was the true genius of humanity's response, Nexus realized. They hadn't just denied the Empire their worlds. They had turned the very act of conquest into a liability. Any attempt to subjugate humanity would risk exposing Imperial worlds to these same protocols. In the secured bunker networks deep beneath Earth's transformed surface, humanity waited. The genetic archives remained intact, along with the seed banks and cultural repositories. They could survive here for generations if necessary, watching through hidden sensors as their worlds demonstrated the price of empire. New data from the long-range probes, Colonel Patel announced. We're detecting similar transformations beginning on several of our outer colony worlds. The protocols are working exactly as designed. Chen allowed herself a small smile. Those colonies had been established in secret, hidden from the Empire's initial surveys. Each one was now becoming another example of humanity's determination, another world that would take centuries to reclaim. Have the backup systems finished their calculations? She asked. Dr. Morrison nodded. The simulations are clear. Even if the Empire somehow found a way to reverse these changes, the energy cost would be astronomical. It would take more resources to reclaim one of our worlds than to terraform a dozen new ones. The strategic implications were impossible to ignore. The Empire had arrived expecting to either absorb or destroy human civilization. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that had turned defeat itself into victory. When the next transmission arrived from the Nexari flagship, it carried something unprecedented in the Empire's 10,000-year history. A formal request for negotiations, with humanity recognized as an equal party. They're scared, Colonel Patel observed, studying the message's subtle undertones. Not just of what we've done, but of what it means. We've shown them that their usual methods of conquest don't work against an enemy willing to go this far. Chen thought about the enormity of what humanity had accomplished. They had faced an overwhelmingly superior force and achieved victory not through military might, but by demonstrating that the very concept of conquest was meaningless against a species willing to transform everything they held dear. Send our response to the Empire, she ordered. Tell them we're willing to discuss terms, but first, they need to understand something. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Tell them that what they've seen is just the beginning. Every human world, every colony, every outpost carries these protocols. We can trigger them at any time, anywhere. The Empire needs to decide if their dream of expansion is worth turning half the galaxy into monuments to their failure. As the message was transmitted, Chen watched the holographic display showing Earth's transformed surface. The crystal forests glowed with internal light, each structure a database of human knowledge and determination. The oceans rippled with patterns of information, telling humanity's story to anyone who dared to read it. They had lost their worlds as they knew them, but in doing so, they had gained something far more valuable. Respect born of fear, and the beginning of a new kind of relationship with the galaxy's greatest power. 5 years after the Nexari Empire's failed attempt to subjugate humanity, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the observation dome of the newly constructed Unity Station, watching Earth's crystalline forests shimmer beneath her. The transformed planet had become something both beautiful and terrible, a living monument to humanity's determination. The Empire's delegation is approaching, Colonel Patel announced, now wearing the insignia of Earth's first Xeno-diplomatic corps. Their ships are following the agreed-upon protocols. The Nexari vessels were smaller this time, diplomatic cruisers rather than warships. They moved with deliberate care through the solar system, their sensors carefully avoiding any deep scans of humanity's transformed worlds. They had learned that lesson the hard way. 3 Imperial survey ships had been lost trying to study Mars' toxic atmosphere, their advanced systems corrupted by the very protocols they attempted to analyze. High Commander Nexus, now serving as the Empire's chief diplomatic envoy, materialized in the station's special reception chamber. His bioluminescence patterns were subtly different from 5 years ago, more measured, more respectful. "Admiral Chen," he pulsed, using the human form of address they had agreed upon. "The Imperial Council has reviewed your latest proposal. We find it intriguing." Chen nodded, gesturing to the holographic display that dominated the chamber's center. It showed a map of the galaxy, with both human and Imperial territories clearly marked. The borders between them were no longer lines of conflict, but zones of cooperation. "Project Renaissance is ready to begin," she explained. "Our scientists have developed methods to partially reverse the transformation protocols. We can restore Earth and Mars to habitability, not to their original state, but to something new, something that both our species can learn from." Dr. Morrison stepped forward, his role having evolved from xenobiologist to one of humanity's key architects of their new future. "The crystal forests have begun showing signs of evolutionary adaptation," he reported. "They're developing new properties, creating hybrid systems that combine biological and technological processes in ways we never imagined. The ocean's data matrices have started generating novel solutions to problems neither of our species knew we had." What had begun as humanity's ultimate defensive measure had become something else entirely, a forced evolution of their worlds into something unprecedented in the galaxy's history, and the Empire's concerns about stability. Nexus inquired, his patterns showing genuine curiosity rather than the old fear. "Have been addressed," Colonel Patul responded, bringing up another display. "The protocols remain in place on all human worlds, but they've been modified. They're no longer just weapons, they're tools for transformation. Any attempt to use them aggressively would require consensus from both our species." This was the new balance they had struck. Humanity had proven they couldn't be conquered, but rather than retreat into isolation, they had chosen to reach out. The Empire, shaken by encountering a species that had redefined the very nature of resistance, had been forced to reevaluate its entire approach to galactic civilization. "There are still those in the Empire who fear you," Nexus admitted, his colors shifting to patterns of deep contemplation. "They say that any species willing to transform their own world so completely cannot be trusted." "And what do you say to them?" Chen asked, though she already knew the answer. "I tell them that is precisely why we must work with humanity," Nexus responded. "You showed us that true power lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the willingness to transform. Our empire has conquered countless worlds, but you taught us that some victories come not through dominance, but through understanding." The observation dome filled with light as the sun rose over Earth's horizon. The crystal forests caught the light and scattered it in complex patterns, each reflection encoding part of humanity's story. The oceans rippled with data waves, their modified molecular structure processing and storing new information with every passing moment. "The first terraforming ships are ready," Morrison reported. "Using what we've learned from the transformation protocols, we can create new worlds that neither of our species could have imagined before. Hybrid ecosystems that combine the best of biological and technological evolution." This was humanity's true victory. They had faced extinction and turned it into transformation. They had taken the Empire's ultimatum and used it to force a revolution in how civilizations interacted. The protocols that had been designed to deny worlds to a conqueror had become the foundation for creating entirely new ones. 5 years ago, we thought we were choosing between submission and destruction. Chen reflected, watching as teams of human and Nexari scientists worked together on the station below. Instead, we found a third path. We proved that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in refusing to change, but in controlling how that change happens. Nexus's bioluminescence rippled in agreement. The Empire sought to prevent instability, he pulsed. Instead, you showed us that true stability comes not from control, but from adaptation. Every transformed world in your territory stands as a reminder not of defeat, but of evolution. As the two leaders continued their discussion, humanity's transformed worlds continued their own evolution. The crystal forests grew and changed, each generation incorporating new patterns and possibilities. The oceans processed and stored the combined knowledge of two civilizations, and in hidden bunkers and secret laboratories across human space, the protocols that had once been humanity's last resort became the seeds of their next great leap forward. They had not just survived the Empire's ultimatum, they had used it to transform themselves and their would-be conquerors, proving that true victory sometimes means becoming something entirely new.